Hello and welcome to MyFusion Helper. My name is Troy Broussard, and in this short video I'm going to show you how to use our Google Sheets integration. This is easily one of the most powerful features that we have, and I've got to tell you, just this one feature alone more than justifies the entire monthly price of MyFusion Helper. Now, I'm going to show you how it works, and this video is going to be longer than most because there's a lot of detail to go into, and I really want to go through some different case studies and show you some practical uses of it, because it's more than just understanding the ABC of how it works, but really kind of thinking through how you'll use this in your business. It's extremely powerful, and we're going to spend a little time going through it. I'm also going to show you how to set it up inside of Infusionsoft, and back and forth what you need to do to configure it, and then we're also going to switch over into Google Sheets and show you how to deploy it as well, so that you can work within all of the environments and bring everything together. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So unlike some of the other helpers where you begin with configuring the helper itself, with this particular helper, it's really an integration between Infusionsoft and Google Sheets. Now, for those of you that are not intimately familiar with Google Sheets, it's essentially an online version of Excel. It allows you to do all kinds of data formatting and data manipulation. And so the way we do this integration is by creating a saved search. Now, there's lots of different ways for saving reports. It's not just through the saved searches. You can also do any type of reports. So in this particular search, I've got contacts that were created during the last 90 days. So maybe I'm looking at some contact creation or lead generation statistics. Now, I've got this pop-up here, so I'm hiding the sensitivity of the email addresses, so I'm not showing all of that data here. But inside of this, you know how you can edit the filters by searching all kinds of data here. You can go through and click on what type they are or address information. There's all kinds of filters that you can do here, right? And you're able to then configure these filters the way you want and then save the search right here. Well, when you save it, that gives it a name, and that becomes a saved report that we can access through the API. Now, another type of report that you could do, this would be an order search. So we can come in here and view orders, and then we can configure the options that we want and save that as well. Now, notice that the columns that are listed here are the exact columns that are going to be exported to Google Sheets. So make sure that you set up these reports the way you want the data to be exported. If you don't need the name and all you really need is an ID and a total, then that's fine. If you want to look at totals that are under $500, then make sure and edit your criteria and set that up, because however you save this report is going to generate the data into Google Sheets. So this is the first part of the configuration, and I recommend using some type of a prefix like GS for Google Sheets, like GS dash. I spelled it out, Google Sheets, here as an abbreviation, but you'll get a lot of these reports in here, so it's kind of nice to group them appropriately. So I would probably use like a capital GS and then a dash and then the name of what it is, and that way all of my Google Sheet export reports would be logically grouped together. So that's the first part of what we're doing, and that's just setting up the reports that we want to use with the integration. Now, the next part is to come into MyFusion Solutions itself, and we're going to create a new helper. Okay, and when we create that helper, it's going to be just Google Sheet it, and we'll give it a name. GS, I'm just going to do demo here because I've already got the two set up that I want to use, but just to show you how this would work. It is so superbly simple, right? The only thing you have to do is name it and then just select the search that you want to use. So I preface them with Google. So here's the Google Leads and the Google Orders that I just showed you inside of Infusionsoft. And that's all you have to do. So if I wanted this to be a leads, to tie into this leads report that we have, I would just say create helper. And now I've got that all set up. And here you see the demo. Okay. Now, I've already got these two set up, and that's what I'm going to tie in. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this, but you see how simple that process is. All you're doing is selecting the actual report and setting it up. So now let's go into Google Sheets and actually configure and deploy all of this so that you understand how to connect the dots from A to Z. Okay, now the first thing you want to do is copy this link. Okay, and this is our code link inside Google Sheets. So we copy that, and then we're going to come inside here and to go Google Sheets, and the thing that we're going to do here is a little bit different. We're not going to work here for a second. We're going to set some things up, okay? So we're going to go here into the script editor. Now, when we go into the script editor, it's going to launch this other window and pull in this code.gs file. Now, we've already copied the code that we're going to use. So now we just paste that code in, and that is the code that's going to execute, and it's going to go launch our API call and pull in the data. Okay, so we're creating an integration function. Now, there's a couple things that I want to walk you through here. You can change the name of this. We default it here, but I'm going to go ahead and change the name. So this was our orders, right? So let's go ahead. I'm going to change the name, and I'm going to just change it here to orders 90 days. Okay, just so I have a name that makes sense to me. And there's one other thing that I wanted to show you here that you may or may not need to change. So it's important that you see where it's at. Inside of here, you'll see a sheet reference, a sheet 1. Now, we assume that when you set one of these functions up that it's going to be putting the data right here in the upper quadrant, cell A1 of sheet 1. If you want to change that and you want to put it on sheet 2, then you would change that to sheet 2 here. Okay, and if you wanted to change it from A1 to, B3 is where it starts, you could do that right here. Now, I'm going to leave it as A1 because we're just going to put it up in the upper left quadrant, and that's the easiest and recommended way to do this. And you'll see this, and I'll give you some best practices as we go ahead and deploy it. So now that's there, and you notice that it's not saved. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and now that is saved. Okay, now one thing to keep in mind is that you may get a pop-up confirmation saying that the sheet requires you to authorize access, and if that's the case, you have to click on the allow button to allow access from the data into the API. Okay, so make sure and confirm that if you need to. So now we've got this in here, okay, and I'm going to show you now that it's already working. So if I go here and choose run, and I run this particular function that I just created, you'll see that it's going to give me a slight delay, and then it's done. And if I come back in here and I pull up sheet 2, you'll see that all the data is here. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to remind you of. Notice that we did change this to sheet 2 here, and so that's why it's going on to sheet 2 instead of sheet 1. Okay, so it's important that we set that appropriately. If I go back here and I change this instead to sheet 1 and hit save, and then run that again to re-execute this, okay, and then I go back into Google, you'll see that it's now on sheet 1, and it's also, the old data is still there on sheet 2 until I delete that. Okay, but you'll see that it brought over the data into sheet 1. So it's going to go where you send it to go. Okay, so that's important. The last little thing I want to demo to you is if I do change that from A1 to, let's just say, C3 instead, and save that. And let's go ahead and delete it from here, first of all. Okay, and then we'll go back here and rerun it. And we'll go in here and see, now you see that it offset the data and brought it here. Okay, now the number of columns is going to be consistent every time you run it because that's defined by the report as you set it up in Infusionsoft. The number of rows is going to vary. So use that to your advantage and make sure that when you set up your formulas that they're taking into account the fact that the row data will vary. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and delete this and clear this out and put it back to a nice clean A1 position in that upper left-hand quadrant. It's just where I like to do things, and we're going to go ahead and leave this on sheet 2 for the orders, and we're going to put the leads on sheet 1. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll rerun it, and we'll have everything in there. Okay, so now we come back here, and on sheet 2 in A1, everything is set. So now we're going to go into MyFusion Helper, and we're going to grab the leads, and we're going to put those on sheet 1. Now, as you can see here, it was at 6 runs. That's how many times the API had been executed before. If I hit refresh now, you'll see that's jumped up to 10, because in the demo, I've actually pulled the data 4 different times. So it increments here. So you see that as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and copy the link for the leads, and we're going to switch into Google Sheets, and we want to put this on sheet 1A1. Okay, so we're going to come in here, and I'm going to go to the end and hit a couple carriage returns, and then paste in the function code first. And remember, I like to rename this, so I'm going to call this leads 90 days. Okay, and I'm going to leave it on sheet 1 is where I want, and it's going to default to A1 for its reference point, so that's fine. We're going to go ahead and save it. Now, make sure and check the name, because if you're using multiple on the same sheet, you may have to rename it so that you don't have a conflict with the same name. All right, so let's go ahead and save that now, and now we can run and generate the leads as well. Now, this one will take a little longer. There we go. And now you can see that it's loading the data. So, don't worry if it takes a little bit of time to load. This has actually got a lot of records that came back. There's several thousand records. So while that seemed like it took a long time, for the amount of data that came back, it really didn't. There's, over 3,000 or 4,000 records here, as you can see. So tons of data came back in that time. It's actually quite fast with the API integration. Now, that is the basic integration of how this would work. The next step is in how to set this up so that the data is pulled automatically. So this is step 2. All right, now step 2 in pulling in the data is to go here into the script editor again, and now we're going to go into resources and triggers. Okay, now it says no triggers are set up. Click here to add one. All right, and notice that it has the drop down for the functions that we've created to get the data, and then we can set up events to when to go and automatically run and pull that data. So I'm just going to set up a nightly, so I'm going to set up as a day, and I'm going to set it up to run at maybe 3 in the morning each night. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a new one for my leads to do the same thing. I'm going to set up a day timer, and I'm going to have it update at 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. just to be at a different time. And this now, if I would go ahead and save this, I'm not going to, because I don't need to set this up. It's just a demo. But all you have to do is hit save now, and this will automatically pull the data in through the API from Infusionsoft on an automatic basis for you. Okay, please do not configure these to be more frequent than you need them. If you set this thing up to pull every 5 minutes and we see, exorbitant API activity on your app, then we will have to disable it and reach out and contact you. So please only set these timers up with the frequency that you need. Many times daily is all you need, or even weekly or monthly, depending on what types of data and reports you're looking at. Okay, I'm not going to save these because I don't need them to be as triggers, but that is how you set up the automation behind this. Now, what you've done, you never have to redo. Once you set up the automation and once you set up the functions, that's all done, and you won't need to go back into that script editor anymore. So now we can come in here and we can see our data. Okay, now what I wanted to show you is a more practical example. So what I've done is I've created a chart off of the sheet 2 data. So this is a histogram of the order data. Okay, so if we go here and we look at our orders, you can see kind of the order amounts here, and they vary in various price points. Here's up to almost $1,100. Here's down to just $99. Well, this histogram chart is going to show us where the majority of our orders are, and the majority of them are at this $375 to $400 price point right here. Okay, excuse me, I said that the wrong way. This is the volume. So there's about 375 to 400 orders at this 245 to 255 price point. Okay, so as you see some of the higher price points, here was that one at like 1,000. There's only a handful of them here, and this histogram shows you where the vast majority of your orders are. There's a bunch at 100 and etc. in this loop. Okay, now to show you how this works real time, I'm going to go in and modify the order report that we're pulling. So we're pulling off of this orders in the last 90 days. Now, if we note here, we had some, going way up in volume, and we saw price points all the way up here at $1,000. Well, I'm going to turn around and put a filter on this, and I'm going to say that the order is less than $500. Okay, so now make sure and save it. So we'll click here to save, and now it's updated this page. Now, if we go into Sheets, nothing has changed yet because we haven't re-pulled the data down. Okay, so we haven't refreshed the data yet. If you're looking at these reports the next day, then we would have had that published in the night and would have pulled it down automatically. But what I can do is I can go back into the script editor and I can just run that function to update the data. So I can go ahead and rerun the order data here now. Okay, and now when I come into the histogram, boom, look at there. It just automatically real-time updated. This is the beautiful power of this functionality, right? You can set up all kinds of charts, any type of forms or calculations or formulas that you need to lay out the data in any manner that you need to see it for your different accounting departments or exports or anything that you need to do, and then simply just update the data on the frequency that you want. Now, what I recommend to keeping this organized is to have your raw data on separate sheets than your charts and your formatted data, so that you're not mixing and matching the two on the same. It kind of gets cumbersome and is easy to make a mistake or to overwrite a cell that you don't want to. So the easiest way to do this is to, keep the data separated from the reports and the formatted version of that data. So that is the power of this integration. Okay, so to recap what we did, step one is we set up a sheet, right? So we went into Google Sheets and we created that sheet one and we set it up clean and got everything ready. Step two was we went ahead and deployed the code from the Code.js from the app. We copied that and we deployed it into the script editor. Step three then was to set up the scheduling of your data refresh. And this is really up to you on the scheduling cycle that you need. Remember, do not do this more frequently than you need. We do monitor the usage of the app aggressively, and if you're setting something up to pull down every 5 minutes, we're going to reach out to you and have a chat. We can't abuse that because that's going to affect everybody else in the system. Okay, so make sure to just pull down the data that you need at the frequency that you need. Now, we have a couple of questions that come in about limitations on this. And there's only a couple of limitations that you have to keep in mind. First of all, we will pull as many records as we can. And what I mean by that is the API limits you to 1,000 at a time. And so people think, well, then you're only pulling 1,000 records. That's not true. We're going to pull several thousand records. As you saw in the examples, they had 3,000 plus records being pulled at once. So we're not limiting on 1,000 or 10,000 or anything like that. There's no hard cutoff number. There is, however, a number that is on the side of Google that is a limitation, and that number is 10 megabytes. Now, the problem is it's very hard to understand what does 10 megs of data look like, because it could be lots of rows with only a couple of columns, or it could be less rows with a lot of columns, right? We don't have any control over that. If you're pulling back really large data sets that are larger than 10 megabytes, the Google API import restricts that, and we won't have control over that. So I recommend that you're pulling smaller reports than that. But as you saw, I pulled down several thousand records with no problems whatsoever. This is probably only going to be a problem if you're trying to export all of your data or something like that. If you're working with reports, you shouldn't have any issues with that whatsoever. Okay? All right, so hopefully this gave you some great ideas and some examples. I wanted to talk about a couple more situations, but one of the things that our clients are using this for is automating data exports for accounting, right? There's individuals in your accounting department, perhaps, that need to see the data formatted in a certain way, and so you can set that all up once and create a nice spreadsheet inside of Google Sheets and then have the data real-time fed from Infusionsoft. So this is, one particular type of usage. Another one is creating snapshot charts that reflect your business metrics and goals that are automatically updated, and either looking at that yourself if you're a solo entrepreneur, or forwarding that on to the CEO of the company where he or she can look at that data and not have to even get into Infusionsoft and just see the core metrics of sales and repeat sales or whatever, lead gen, whatever you're tracking that are the core business growth metrics, and doing that with nice charts and graphs, however you want to lay that out. Another good example is just, honestly, any kind of reporting you need. At the end of the day, you saw how incredibly flexible this is, and you can really configure this to do anything your little heart desires. There are so many possibilities. This is by far the most powerful integration that we've offered, and customers love it. This is one of the most widely used and enjoyed features of MyFusion Helper, so I hope you're enjoying it as well. If you need help, reach out to us on the help desk at help@myfusionsolutions.com.